AI is changing. I mean, week to week, we can experience something drastically different when a new release comes out. At the same time, it can be overwhelming and anxiety producing. Investing in the human technology, understanding our thoughts, understanding our emotions and how those influence our behaviors, our actions, our ability to communicate and collaborate and connect. That's where the value is. We tend to go into fight or flight, even from an email or a deadline or some sort of comment that our boss or a colleague made. The body is perceiving these everyday experiences as a threat. Accountability is also imperative because you can't be blaming someone else or a circumstance or time or a project deadline for how you feel if you're below the line. You can take accountability that that's your reaction to it, and then you can bring yourself back above the line. Nobody is going to get through life without making mistakes. We have to be able to make a mistake, reset, recover, and get back in the game. We also need to be able to, have a handful of meetings, take recovery time. So when we get to that third or fourth meeting, we're back to our peak self.
Welcome to Inside AI Digital. I'm your host, YJ. Today, I'm really excited to be joined by Kristen, our SVP of Empowerment, which is one of more unique titles and probably not a role that we often get a chance to hear from directly. In an industry where spending so much time talking about AI and automation, we don't always spend enough time talking about the people that are navigating behind the scenes, right? So Kristen brings more than 25 years of experience across human performance, leadership development, executive coaching. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Kristen, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, YJ. It's great to be here.
So Kristen, for people hearing about SVP of Empowerment for the first time, can you tell us a little bit about your journey and what your role looks like today?
Yeah, so my journey started in occupational therapy. I have a master's in OT. I was working in pediatrics, and then I had a pretty big kind of life shift at that time. I actually had a health crisis that took me to understanding more about, the body and integrative practices, and I got about 50% better with some medical intervention. But it wasn't until I found the influence of the thoughts that I wasn't paying attention to, the emotions I was ignoring, and the beliefs I didn't know that I had, how much those were influencing my physical health. So I pulled these kind of principles together through, neuroscience and ended up kind of reprogramming my own mind and had a full health recovery. So I brought these concepts into my world as a therapist, and I saw changes happening at an exponential degree. Also found that therapy, that world was sort of limiting. And I found that if I could leave that world and move to coaching, it opened up the possibilities pretty significantly. So I pivoted from being a therapist with a great job, going out on my own as a coach, growing, my coaching practice. I did classes, workshops, retreats. I wrote a book. I ran year-long mastermind programs, and I grew it. Over that time, I worked with parents, and then I did life coaching. And then by the time I get to this part of my career, I had worked with a number of executives. I was very motivated by working with executives and leaders because of the impact they can have on their teams and an entire organization. At that point, I had co-developed a leadership empowerment training program and was delivering that to different companies, one of which was an ad tech company that asked me to come in-house. So I went from running, a coaching organization to in-house in ad tech running empowerment programs. So I was there for about 3.5 years, and then I found myself in the ad tech industry. I found that those in the industry were actually quite receptive to these empowerment concepts. They were receptive to the science behind thoughts, understanding their emotions, managing their stress. And so I found it a very fruitful and rewarding industry to be in. So now that I'm here at AI Digital, I am coaching the executives and most on the leadership team. I am delivering leadership training programs, facilitating at offsites, and also scaling programs company-wide. So it's basically my dream job.
That's amazing. And I love that you were able to turn some of those core challenges into this incredible journey and career. You mentioned, about building leadership empowerment program and leaders being very receptive of what you had built. And I know you've been working very closely with our leadership as well in the last couple of months. We'd love to hear about how our leaders have been in adapting to this moment where there's so much change happening all across.
I'm watching them become more self-aware. Self-awareness is imperative for professional and personal growth. If we don't know something's going on, we can't do anything about it. I always say, if your coffee maker is leaking behind the counter and you don't know it, you can't get it fixed, right? So we have to have self-awareness first. And the leaders that I'm working with, I'm watching that self-awareness unfold using a framework, being above the line and below the line. Above the line is this, I'm curious, I can collaborate, I can problem solve, kind of connected place where my brain and my emotions are regulated and I'm, functional and really, productive and powerful. Or I can be below the line where I'm defensive, angry, seeing through a lens of limitation. And so we're using this kind of framework to help them understand where they are at that moment. And then I see our leaders also being accountable. Accountability is also imperative because you can't be blaming someone else or a circumstance or time or a project deadline for, how you feel if you're below the line. You can take accountability that that's your reaction to it, and then you can bring yourself back above the line. I see the leaders doing that through self-awareness, through accountability. Then they're able to make conscious and inspired action and decisions from that place. And the biggest joy in my experience is watching how the leadership are rippling throughout the organization. I think with the leaders being a better version of themselves, it is influencing their teams, mostly by being, not by lecturing or, demanding certain behaviors. Just by being a better version of themselves, they are more positively influencing their teams.
That's great. And I love the analogy of above the line and below the line. I'm going to start using that as well. Now, looking at the organizational level, what kind of trends are you seeing within, workers all around us? And outside leadership environment, are they above the line, below the line? Are they excited or overwhelmed? Are you feeling anxiety, especially in such state of the industry?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say what I'm experiencing is a combination of excitement. It's a very exciting time to be in this industry. AI is changing, week to week, we can experience something drastically different when a new release comes out. That's exciting. At the same time, it can be overwhelming and anxiety producing. Really investing in the human technology, understanding our thoughts, understanding our emotions and how those influence our behaviors, our actions, our ability to communicate and collaborate and connect. That's where the value is. We can't make the anxiety go away necessarily, but we can be aware of it. We can learn to process it and we can move on. It's not about not being stressed. It's not about not being anxious. It's about being able to manage that. And ancestors would go into fight or flight, the sympathetic nervous system, when they were running from a saber-toothed tiger to stay alive. We tend to go into fight or flight, even from an email or a deadline or, some sort of comment that our boss or a colleague made. The body is perceiving these everyday experiences as a threat. If we can understand that, have compassion for ourselves, and learn how to bring ourselves back above the line, this is going to be a differentiator. This is where, investing in the human technology as the AI evolves is going to be the, difference in true peak performance.
I can definitely relate because, you mentioned you can't make anxiety go away, but you have to learn to manage your emotions. And oftentimes we are expected to perform at a high level consistently, and that leads us to burnout, right? So I want to talk a little bit about what is a healthier way or a more sustainable way to manage that.
I'm so happy we're talking about this because I'm passionate about it. And if we can reiterate this to our company, wonderful. If this can make it out into the world, that's even better. Being able to manage our state is absolutely imperative to our happiness, our fulfillment, and our ability to function. What we need to be doing is prioritizing reset, prioritizing recovery time. If you went to the gym every day and for 3 hours you bench pressed, your muscles would have an injury. If you never went to the gym, you would atrophy. But we need to go to the gym, exercise, and then recover. Exercise and recover. This is how you build a muscle, and this is how you build capability and performance. So if we are going day after day with back-to-back meetings, we are going to be, struggling with that burnout and that sort of injury. So we need to be prioritizing reset and recovery. I am encouraging people when I'm working with them and throughout the org to put in scheduled breaks into your calendar. I have people say, I can't do that this week. And I say, okay, go 3 weeks ahead and put it in there, and you'll be able to then kind of manage that. We don't miss an appointment to get our oil changed, do we, YJ?
Absolutely not.
Yeah, we don't miss hair appointments. We don't miss doctor's appointments, but we don't prioritize ourselves throughout our day. Okay. And so recovery is where it's at, prioritizing yourself. And, there was a study done years ago on elite tennis players. What separated the top 1% of tennis players from the rest of the top performers? And the one difference that was noted was their ability to recover. What did they do between games, between sets, between matches in order to get themselves ready? Nobody is going to get through life without making mistakes. We have to be able to make a mistake, reset, recover, and get back in the game. We also need to be able to, have a handful of meetings, take recovery time. So when we get to that third or fourth meeting, we're back to our peak self.
That's a great analogy. Speaking of recovery, for some of our listeners who may be going through a lot of those challenges on a day-to-day, do you have any simple tips, habits, or mindset shifts that we can incorporate on our daily routine?
Yeah, so like I said, I think prioritizing that into the schedule, going back to the kind of fight or flight sympathetic nervous system component, what happens when we are in fight or flight is the blood in our body courses to our arms and our legs so we can fight or we can run. This is actually not helpful when an email is something that has taken us into fight or flight, right? Because we don't need to fight anything, we don't need to run. So what also happens when we're in fight or flight is we start to breathe more shallowly. So one of the key practices that I start with in almost every program is teaching people how to manage their breath. So if you start to take deeper breaths in and then make sure your exhalation is even longer than that inhalation, and you do that for at least 90 seconds, the stress hormones in your body, the cortisol, and all of the kind of chemicals that make us feel like we need to fight or run start to get processed and they get eliminated. So 90 seconds of extending your exhale and slowing down and pausing can reset your body. It's hard when all the emails or all the deadlines are firing at you, continuously, but it's a practice, and this is, I encourage people to start and end every day with breath work in between each meetings. This is a great, reset activity as well.
It sounds like I'm doing a decent job because typically in between podcasts, I would do a little stretch, maybe some push-ups, just to get the blood pumping. And it definitely helps me because sometimes, I feel a little tired or, fatigued. So that's great.
YJ, I'm going to have you come in and start teaching these things with me because I need I need some backup, of somebody doing squats or push-ups in between meetings. This is stellar.
Yeah, we used to actually do it, when we worked back in office environments. But here we just have to think to ourselves and remind ourselves constantly to do these types of routine and get into a habit.
Right, prioritizing ourselves. That's right.
Kristen, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your perspective. I think this was really important conversation and a good reminder that behind technology and innovation, it's still ultimately about people that's driving the real impact.
Yeah, absolutely.
And thank you to everyone listening. Really appreciate you tuning in. We'll see you on the next episode.